It is primary night in Colorado.
What a victory. I mean, come on, they called it early.
U.S. Senate, Secretary of State, and Governor.
We have one goal now, one goal, and that is to beat Jared Polis this fall.
Tonight, Coloradans have narrowed down their choices ahead of November's election.
All right, polls to close, results are in, and we have a pretty good idea of who will be on the November ballot.
Thank you for joining us for Denver 7 News at 10 on this primary night in Colorado. There are several key races we are following tonight, including the races for Governor, U.S. Senate, and Secretary of State.
All right, let's get right to our political reporter, Megan Lopez, tracking results as they come in. Busy night, Megan.
Yeah, three big takeaways from tonight so far, guys. A lot of races called early. Incumbents, they did very well. Congressman Ken Buck and Doug Lamborn, as well as Congresswomen Diana DeGette and Lauren Boebert, all held on. Now, they had vastly outraised their political opponents. In DeGette, Buck, and Lamborn's cases, it was by hundreds of thousands. In Boebert's case, it was by millions. Tonight, in many races, money talked. So let's get to the governor's race. Ganal beat Greg Lopez. Ganal outraised Lopez significantly. She raised about $145,000, has about $48,000 transitioning into the general election. That will grow. She has a long road ahead, though. Governor Polis has nearly $4.7 million cash on hand, ready to go for the general election. And Ganal already saw some of that Democratic spending in the primary. There was a very expensive TV ad campaign that was paid for by Democratic-backed groups that looked to boost up Greg Lopez. Despite this, Ganal says that she's ready for November and she knows her mission.
And our kids are not okay right now in Colorado thanks to Jared Polis and Democrats. It is time for all of us to step together, to come together, to join together, to win back our state. Put aside the divisiveness. Put aside our differences. We have one goal now, one goal, and that is to beat Jared Polis this fall.
So taking a look at the map, you can see Ganal did very well in the Front Range, but she also did well in places like Telluride and Durango, now as well as Colorado Springs. I want to go ahead now and switch to the Secretary of State's race. That's where you had Pam Anderson go ahead and beat out Tina Peters, but also she beat out Mike O'Donnell, who was a newcomer. She's a former Jefferson County clerk and the former executive director of the County Clerks Association. She was actually outraised by Tina Peters by about $6,000. But Peters was a very divisive candidate. So moving into the general election, Griswold has $283,000 cash on hand. Now, one more race that we want to take a look at, and it's businessman Joe O'Dea. And he won the nomination tonight, so he's going to take on Michael Bennet. He outraised Representative Ron Hanks by millions of dollars, though he did loan himself about $500,000. His total receipts are around $2.33 million. Now, that does sound like a lot, but when we're talking about moving into a general election, Bennet has a much bigger political war chest. He also has that name recognition. According to his filings, he's got $7 million cash on hand. And so my last takeaway tonight is we're going to watch some money going into the general, but also we're going to watch the unaffiliated voters, guys.
Oh, you bet. And we know you'll be watching. Thank you, Megan. And as Megan mentioned, Joe O'Dea will be the Republican name on the ballot for November for the U.S. Senate race. This is his first ever run for political office.
Of course, taking on incumbent Democratic Senator Michael Bennet. And with control of the Senate on the line, this one will be watched nationwide. Denver 7's Rob Harris is live in Denver tonight, where O'Dea is celebrating his win.
Yeah, and Shannon, O'Dea was joined by some of his top supporters here at the Mile High Station event venue here in Denver. And they were celebrating a lot earlier than they thought they would be, because the Associated Press called the race for O'Dea before 8 o'clock, and he went on to speak at 8 o'clock, which again was earlier than they thought that might be the case. Now, during his victory speech, O'Dea spent a lot of time calling out the Democratic Colorado Super PAC, which had been running ads propping up his opponent, Ron Hanks. Hanks is more conservative. He's questioned President Biden's election victory and marched to the Capitol on January 6th.
I got to tell you, this multi-million-dollar campaign by Democrats in the Republican primary is everything that American people hate about politics. It's pure cynicism, it's deceit,
O'Day also spent a good chunk of his speech promising to be an independent voice in the Senate who will stand up to members of his own party, even promising to be a Republican Joe Manchin. That's referring to the Democratic senator from West Virginia who has blocked many of his own party's policies.
I won't vote the party line. Don't know how to do it. Michael Bennet, though, he votes with the Democratic Party every time. I'll be more like a Republican Joe Manchin. I'll vote my conscience. I'll make tough choices. I will ruffle feathers.
Now, being seen as the moderate compared to Ron Hanks paid off for O'Day tonight, with him getting about 55% of the vote. Shannon?
Harris tonight. Thank you, Rob, at the O'Day campaign. Let's track some U.S. House races tonight, starting in District 3 out on the West Slope. Lauren Boebert lives to seek a second term, fending off a challenge tonight from State Senator Don Coram. That race was called just after 7:30, so Boebert easily winning there. And there are 3 Democrats vying to take Boebert on in November. And right now, at last check, Adam Frisch is in the lead, 44% over his closest competitor there. We'll keep watching that one.
Now here in Denver, Democratic Representative Diana DeGette faced a primary challenger from Neil Wallian. The incumbent, now in her 13th term, soundly defeated her opponent. She will now face Jennifer Colteri, who ran unopposed for the Republican nomination. Now to the 4th Congressional District out on the Eastern Plains, Republican incumbent Ken Buck. He defeated his challenger, Robert Lewis, 75 to 25%. Buck will face Ian McCorkle in November. McCorkle ran unopposed for the Democratic nomination.
On to the 5th Congressional District. Republican Doug Lamborn will defend his seat come November. Lamborn easily handled 3 challengers this time around, and David Torres will be the one taking on Lamborn. Representing the Democrats in the 5th, he defeated Michael Cullum.
And in the race for Colorado's 7th Congressional District, Eric Adlin has now won the Republican nomination. And he will face Democrat Brittany Pedersen in the general election. The winner of that race will replace longtime Representative Ed Perlmutter, who is retiring. And in the newly formed 8th Congressional District, north of Denver, State Senator Barb Kirkmeyer has won the Republican nomination there with 41%. In November, she will face Democrat Yadira Caraveo, a state representative who ran unopposed tonight. So with the primary now in the books, the full focus turns to the general election.
So we asked DU political science professor Seth Maskett for his thoughts as we head into the general.
There are a number of things that do suggest a tough year for Democrats in the fall. I mean, you have obviously high inflation, you have a fairly unpopular President Biden. Generally, the president's party doesn't do well in midterms, and that looks likely to happen this year as well. So that all is going to create a bit of a turnout problem for Democrats, but we still don't know exactly what that will look like. We'll learn more over the next few months.
And plenty of state house races tonight as well.
In the race for House District 6 in Denver, Elizabeth Epps, Katie March seeking the Democratic nomination right now. That is a very tight race. The winner will face Republican Donald D. Howell, who ran uncontested.
All right, House District Race 25 in Jeffco. Colin Larson defeated Dee Dee Wagner for the Republican nomination. So Larson will face Democrat Tammy Story.
And in Colorado House District 51 in Larimer County, incumbent Hugh McKean has won the Republican race, defeating challenger Austin Heim.
Coverage of tonight's primary election continues right now on thedenverchannel.com, and we'll also have more coverage and more reaction starting at 4:30 a.m. on the Denver 7 Morning News.
Now to some stunning developments in Washington as the House Select Committee investigating the January 6th insurrection holds another hearing.
And today, former White House aide Cassidy Hutchinson testified about former President Trump's actions as thousands of his supporters stormed the U.S. Capitol.
Denver 7's Jessica Porter breaks down the most shocking details from today's testimony.
Surprise witness Cassidy Hutchinson, a former top aide to Mark Meadows, Trump's last White House chief of staff, telling the January 6th committee she had conversations about the potential for violence days before January 6th.
I just had an interesting conversation with Rudy. Mark, sounds like we're going to go to the Capitol. He didn't look up from his phone and said something to the effect of, there's a lot going on, Cass, but I don't know. Things might get real bad.
Hutchinson giving damning testimony that the White House and the president were aware his supporters were armed, but did nothing to prevent the violence.
Around 10 a.m., 10:15 a.m., where I remember Tony mentioning knives, guns in the form of pistols and rifles, bear spray, body armor, spears, and flagpoles.
Hutchinson says Trump demanded aides remove metal detectors, magnetometers, and allow individuals with weapons into the crowd.
I overheard the president say something to the effect of, I don't effing care that they have weapons. They're not here to hurt me. Take the effing mags away. Let my people in.
Hutchinson also testified that Trump wanted to join the protesters as they marched to the Capitol, and Trump was so furious his security detail wasn't taking him to the Capitol, he lunged at a Secret Service agent.
I'm the effing president. Take me up to the Capitol now. To which Bobby responded, "Sir, we have to go back to the West Wing." The president reached up towards the front of the vehicle to grab at the steering wheel.
President Trump responded to these allegations today by calling Hutchinson a phony and a leaker. Committee co-chair Liz Cheney ended the hearing with concerns that witnesses are being intimidated by the former president and his allies. In the studio, Jessica Porter, Denver 7.
A disgusting crime. Denver police looking for a man accused of groping women, including a young girl.
I was in shock. I was just on the verge of tears.
Tonight, one of those victims is speaking to Denver 7.
90s again today. We'll see them again tomorrow, but a change arrives on Thursday.
Plus, the party continues for your Stanley Cup champion, the Colorado Avalanche.